You know, this is driving me crazy. So many people I want to give hugs to and shake hands with because it's not fair that I should get started talk without having really greeted you. So do me a favor, start holding hands from the back and make a chain up to here and across there too if you want. Sure, why not? Ready, set, Shalom Aleichem. The topic, which in a way was the pretext to get us together tonight, do you mean it? If you don't mean it, you'll still have a nice evening. I'll be doing my stand-up visionary. And it'll be a program. Or, and I do have a feeling that deep in our kishkes, we always come in the hope that it'll be able to transcend the frame of a program, and that the topic is going to be a for real. So it talks about Jewish spirituality, and it talks about the transformation of individuals and of the planet. So on the one hand, it's such a pretentious title. Zalman, do you mean you're gonna do this all in a couple of hours? First of all, why not? With ideas, you can do so many things, you know. In the world, Kabbalists call the world of Beriah, which is the world where the mind operates. The mind operates in a world that's so rare, so wonderful, and everything is so pliable in the mind. So you can put together a wonderful utopia in the mind, and you can visualize this, and you can get a real feel of it, and you can get to the place where you say, Mashiach has come, in the mind. And then something else happens, and we aren't in the same place anymore, and then Mashiach hasn't come yet. So we get to the place of, what's the difference between how we put it together in the mind and what it takes to get it together in the world? And if you think that I have the answer, let me tell you right now from the beginning that would you please let go of that expectation. All I have is my piece of the puzzle, and you have yours. And the only way in which we can get it together is together. You can't get it together anymore solo. When I sit in my armchair, I can get it together solo. It's wonderful. Okay? But then 5 minutes later, someone will irritate me down from the Mount Olympus of my messianic vision and get me to the pinprick of what nudges me in my life, and gone is all that, and the issue is interaction between myself and other people, interaction between ourselves and the environment and so on. So we got big things to worry about. If we were constantly aware of the karma we carry with ourselves, the burden would be impossible. So we forget. So there's a sweetness about that that says you can't do anything about it. You know, you can't keep worrying about it either. If worrying would help, All the rich people would hire a warrior. So what happens then is that a kindness makes us forget, and we develop blind spots, and we don't feel where the problems are. So then I have to come and do a whole number of telling you, oi Gewalt, the tzavas out there, you know, in the world, and talk about nuclear problems, with finances, with the state of Israel. I could paint a bad picture, right? Now, I don't want to do it because you've got your own nightmares in your kishkes. But most of the time, we don't look at them. So I want you to create now a little bit safe space for us all here, so we can allow ourselves to look at the nightmare places inside. Because that's the motivation for what I have to say. And if we get clear with that, then we can collaborate, because then we have to deal with how do we transform the karma that is into what it needs to be, so we can survive with meaning, with dignity, significantly. So I want you to chant with me. Anna Adonai Hoshiyana. Anna Adonai Hoshiyana. Anna Adonai Hatzlichana. Anna when we say Anna Adonai Hoshiana, to pay attention to that nightmarish stuff that scares us. And when we say the words Anna Adonai Hatzlichana, to look at what we get in action directives and ask God to help us to do something with that, okay? The words are, please God help, please God make us prosper, make it work for us, okay? Look at some of the personal things in your life where there's heavy karma. Anna Adonai Hoshiana. Anna Adonai Hoshiana. Anna And now, the people who form the system of which you are a vital part. Anna Adonai Hoshiana. Anna Adonai Hoshiana. Anna Adonai Hatzlichana. Anna Adonai Hatzlichana. Now if you would please focus on one political event that needs to happen to heal our planet, and pray. Anna Adonai Hoshiana. Anna Adonai Hoshiana. Anna Adonai Hatzlichana. Anna Adonai Hatzlichana. I can translate stuff from one language into another. But the material still is saying the same thing, but now in a different language. In transformation, the material is not saying the same thing. It is saying what that thing then needed to accomplish, this thing now is able to accomplish. And they're different and they're the same. So that you have a situation in which in transformation you want to say, plus ça change, plus la même chose. It's changed so much, and that's how it kept its identity. Okay? So when we talk about this business of Judaism and spirituality, and if I say it is different than it was before, it's not the same thing, then I rob myself of the power of generations, of the wonderful wisdom of life that has encoded in life forms, ways of doing just that which we want to do. How do you take your kids and talk to them straight about the God stuff? Okay. It's very hard. So what do? Every year we have a Seder, and you sit down on Pesach, and you tell the story. So we have encoded a social way, a socieme, yeah? A social form whereby generation, intergenerational stuff that has to do with God freeing human beings from being at home in slavery gets translated into matzah balls and into Haggadah and all this kind of stuff. Now the trouble is that if you take the old Maxwell House Haggadah, remember that used to get with the matzahs, you bought 5 pounds of matzahs and some Pesachike coffee, you got a Maxwell House Haggadah. And most households ran their Seder by that Haggadah. And what happened was that they said the words because, you know, there were those funny pictures in there, and you said all those words because that's the way they had to be said. But Zayde at the same time looked at the English and didn't think that was the real Haggadah. But by the time it comes to grandson, if not the Holy One, blessed be He, had redeemed our ancestors from Egypt, and you get all this language that was trying to say, transform the Hebrew, remember? No, translate the Hebrew into Victorian English. Now, if we just merely translate it to a more current language, it still is the same Haggadah, and it can't get us through doing that job that we want to do intergenerationally of really telling truth to the next generation of what I know about God. Where should you go for a model? If you would go to the generation that preceded us and ask them, what was God stuff all about? What are you trying to tell me about Pesach? And you would find that you wouldn't get the matzah and you wouldn't get the knedlach, you would only get the bitter herbs. What can someone who grew up and was educated before the Holocaust, lived through the Holocaust, tell someone who asked the questions about God after the Holocaust? How difficult it was for them to talk about God. So they talked about Zionism and about Israel and about UJA and about the temple and the building fund. Do you understand what I'm getting at? It was so hard to tell that. I'm so pissed at God. Okay? Get that feeling? Okay. This hasn't had a kind of institutional thing. If a parent could have said it at the Seder, could you imagine how that would have cleared out a lot of the opacity on the level of spiritual stuff, because then at least the child would hear about the caring and the protest and the belief that there is someone in the universe to be pissed at least, okay? And we didn't get that. So what we got was empty. So you couldn't speak of Jewish spirituality because it didn't dare to face itself and its deep theological, philosophical, emotional, functional problems that it had. The funny thing is that nothing works anymore. If you are trying to use the old, it doesn't work anymore. And the new, which would be the result of successful transformation, of successful transformation, it hasn't arrived yet. We are in one of those periods in human history when you don't have the height of a civilization, but you have the Gnostic valley. Let me try and explain that a little bit. When the age of Aries went out, the biblical period at the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, and with it went out the whole technology of how you are a Jew when there is a holy temple and you bring a sheep to the sanctuary and you do all this stuff in that technology. That wore out. And we had to learn how to be a Jew without a homeland and without a temple and create a whole new technology which used words, which was, instead of being in space, was in time. And all these transformations that were necessary. And at that time, before the old one was altogether gone, and before the new one was yet really established, there was a period where the traditions were soft. Their bones were soft, as it were. They were going through a transformation. And what you found during that period was a high degree of Gnosticism. People were looking for direct experience, and it was out of that direct experience that they had that Rabbinic Judaism, Christianity, later on Islam, grew out of that humus, of that very fertile place that was fertilized by that direct experience period of that Gnostic dip. Got that? The reason why I'm saying this is because we're in the same boat today. When you talk about paradigm shift, even the words, while they are describing the thing correctly, are very masculine and punctive. They say, it went up to here, was that one, boom, punkt, and then it shifted, right? Instead of talking about the contractions of the new age that were felt before, and the echoes of the old age that still interlace with that, so that there could be a gradual and a vital and an energetic transformation of that old material. So the rabbis used to use the words when they talked about pangs, that they spoke of chevle leda, the pangs of birth, chevle mavet, the pangs of death, and chevle Mashiach, the pangs of the coming of the Messiah. One of the great things that Luria did was that he spoke about Tzimtzum. Translate Tzimtzum and you would hear the word contraction. But very few Kabbalists have heard the word contraction from the point of view of one who attends a birth. This was a place where the men were out of meturnisht. Geh weg, you shouldn't be present at the birth. We'll call you later on, Bambris. Okay? And it's now happening differently, that men are present at birth, and men do get a sense of contractions, and then you go back to Kabbalah, and here you see what I'm trying to say, that we are going through this series of pangs in which the transformation is taking place. It isn't there yet, and there is an anticipation, and the energy that's necessary, and it has nothing to do with our choice. You know, the strange thing about it is that most of the stuff in Judaism, when we talked before, was very highly conscious, highly deliberate. What does a Jew do? He decides he does this, and at such a time he does it, and he follows through, and this is what he does next. And so what you get is a whole series of what you do about it. What happens in birth, if it was up to you to invite a contraction, you know, you wouldn't call for it, okay? So what's happening is it comes, and at that time, and again, if you're a male at that, forgive me for dwelling on that, but it does cast some light on what we are dealing with. What does a male doctor want to do? This is terrible. I mean, this baby will never make it through. The head is too big, dilation hasn't happened yet. We got to do something, right? And what will the midwife say? Listen, it'll take another half hour. What do you mean, you got to do something, right? Part of our transformation is to witness the places in which we don't have to do because it's happening. To welcome what is happening and to collaborate with this. That's an issue that has to do with awareness and has to do with how we're going to integrate that in how we understand Jewish spirituality. First of all, it calls for togethering. We have a rule about a minyan. You need 10 people to daven together, 10 men, mind you, yeah, to daven together. So, do you remember having had that experience? I've had it often. There are 9 of us there, a mevart. And at that point, there may be 7 women there who could help make a minyan, but you wait. And what are you looking for? You're looking for the numbers. And nobody asked the question, what do you need a minyan for? And if one were to ask the question, what do we need a minyan for, is to be able to say that the divine Shechina, in order to manifest, needs to have all the 10 Sefirot represented there, okay? Now that's a different statement than to say 10 numbers, okay? 10 times the same organismically does not create a minyan. When we say, may the God who blessed Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, for instance, and we mention the 3, it isn't that we are mentioning him only because they're 3 individuals, but because Abraham is an individual of grace, and because Isaac is an individual of rigor, and because Jacob is an individual of heart, of Tiferet. So we say, now we have all the 3 pillars there, okay? So what is it that we would need with a minyan? We would need the thinkers and the feelers and the doers and the intuitors to be able to each one do their thing best and share as closely as we can get to telepathy with one another. Okay? And we need to create language for togethering. So I'm saying, it's not that I am active and you are passive. We're interactive, constantly interactive. And I don't know of any language at this point that has verbs in that interactive form. So we need to do a lot to get our language into a different shape. I'm asking myself a question, what's going on? What's happening in our Jewish family? Oy. It looks like we are facing a split. There is stuff going on like in an amoeba before it becomes 2. I'm frightened about our children who may not be able to marry one another across whatever line of definition of Judaism. I'm frightened about not only in our backyard, but the most significant things that are happening in terms of numerical and financial strength. The people who are building the institutions and who are getting things together that need to be gotten together in order to strengthen networks are the people who would like to defend the status quo ante. People who would like to revert back, let's say, to the Judaism from before the Holocaust and reestablish that here. And I see that in Khomeini's Medina, that can you imagine how many people are willingly facing death? Imagine you are sitting in one of those trucks that carries explosives and you're going to be a car bomb. And you know that this is the end of your life. We call them terrorists, but just imagine what the intention is on the part of that person. Do we see on our side of the team, on our side of the net, people with such deep intentionality, laying their lives on a line to create our kind of a world? You know what I'm getting at? The intensity that's coupled with fanaticism is creating energy clusters, and we don't know how to relate to them other than on an adversary basis. This polarization is going to cost us both, and in fact pulls us back to the old chessboard, the one from which we want to be freed. It has to do with waging peace. There is hardly any goodwill for war, and there is fantastic amount of sophistication. There is a lot of goodwill for peace, and there is no sophistication. You talk to people about peace and they'll give you all the wonderful hopes and platitudes, but no one knows the technology of what do you do in a peaceful way to engage the one who meets you as an enemy to meet you as a partner. Okay? What do we know about that? We know so little. We know so little. Could you imagine if we knew more about it, how we could heal marriages and intergenerational conflicts and conflicts between countries? Us and our cousins in the Middle East, if we knew how to do that, okay? We don't know yet how to do it. We need a yeshiva with practica. We need centers of spiritual renewal in which our chevre, the people who would like to perpetuate Judaism, but in this transformed way in which the God of the future calls us to become one. That's a toughie. We don't know yet how to do it. Someone complained in the various newspapers, there were complaints, the Carmelites want to establish a foundation in Auschwitz where the sisters would pray, and Jewish organizations get angry at this. Instead of saying, and next to the Carmelite place there ought to be a Jewish place in which we would use everything that we have in our tradition to help earthbound souls to get freed. The blood is still crying out from that place, and blood that's crying out cries out for more blood. So there's going to be very hard to keep peace unless one can have a very conscious neutralization of that crying blood on battlefields from Gettysburg to the ovens. There is a need for a kind of pacification after the war things are over to be able to heal all the other stuff that keeps pulling us back. What do we know about what the Palestinians need in order to be able to live with us? People are asking me, Zalman, I hear you're going to Israel, you're going to make Aliyah. What for? And the answer, the only answer I can give is something tells me that we have to help with the yinning of Israel because Israel is too brittle from yang. We are shicker with our understandings about land. We don't know how to deal with land, so we're intoxicated by the land that we have. We have lost our savvy and balance about that. Listen, how would you feel after 2,000 years you get some land back, you know? It is very unsettling too. Another thing, all these are like bits of a mosaic and they won't fit together until we're going to meditate on them and see. In the past, when we saw another religion operating, our attitude was, please God, don't listen to them goyim, or theirs was the same about us. You know, we have it together, they haven't got it together, God, don't listen to them. In our period, it's changed. It's going to the place, please God, listen to him and listen to her, listen to everybody who's talking to you because we really need to get help. The understandings that we are getting now is that if you think organically, then every religion fits organically its members. Because if you see it deeper, you see that there is really only one religion. Generic religion. You know, no frills religion. And if you want it with garlic and tomato sauce, you know, you can do it this way. And if you would like it to be, you know, with a Jewish taste, you get it this way. But the only religion that works is generic religion. Now, when you begin to see this, that we on this planet can't get it together unless we talk to our counterparts in the other religions. So the kind of coalitions that need to happen are not coalitions of people who say, well, my religion isn't so good, your religion isn't so good, can we have dialogue? Because you see, the people who say, my religion is tops, don't want to talk with the other guy. And what we now need is to have believers on both sides who also see the next thing, namely, that we are all being moved forward to that place when the jigsaw puzzle will fit together. And if anybody says that this means our becoming diluted, then they don't understand. Because the world needs for people like us to say, is it kosher? Looking at the ingredients. The world needs for us to be able to ask, is this electricity glut? Or is it from a nuclear reactor? Okay? These kinds of questions, this kind of halacha hasn't yet come out. It's not likely it's going to be done in Brooklyn or in Mea Sharim. Okay? But it is very important for us to ask these questions, and I want to make sure that V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam, that there will be generations of people who will have this wonderful sadhana of Shabbos to be able to do Shabbosing together and to do Shabbosing in the way in which it needs to be done then, the way in which it needs to be done now, not like it was done in the shtetl before. If it's possible for you to stand, get up. And do this chant with me. Anna Eilna Refana Anna Eilna Refana Anna Eilna Refana Anna Eilna Refana. It means, God, please heal her. Who the her is that needs healing, that's us, the neshama, the planet, everything that needs healing, okay? It was Moses' prayer for his sister Miriam to be healed. So beyond sibling rivalry, deeper than anything else, into the genetic bond, he speaks and offers this prayer, please God, make her well. So shuckle a little bit, you know, don't just stand, and allow this to be a real prayer for the planet and for what we have to do in order to make the transformation happen. Tradition. Most people, when they hear the word tradition, have a sense like Tevye, tradition, 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 tradition. You don't know why it got started and why it is there, but you do it because it's demanded of you, because there is someone who is holding you up with a gun, you know, like those comedy routines where you shoot the gun and out comes a flag, says tradition. Okay? What, Daddy, why do I have to do it? Tradition, okay? After a while, we have been clobbered so much with this tradition stuff. Tradition, see? I'm wired up to the past, to the present, to the future. That's the way it goes. When I understand what tradition really is all about, I get to see that tradition is nothing but what I left behind the last time. In my last incarnation, I decided I don't want to have to start from scratch. So I found somebody to turn it over to, so that the next time I come back, he can give it back to me. Now, at one time, I want to tell you something. I thought that this understanding of tradition was sort of one of those smart meditation ahas. You know what I mean? You sit down, you meditate, and you get one of those cosmic ahas, and you know it's good. It has some mileage in it. It may not be the truth. This one, I'm finding on a very cellular level to be the truth. I'm getting older. I'm getting messages, and the body is saying that the medium on which there is encoded so much. I mean, you know, you like something in my being here, in my doing it with you, in our interaction together. And what you like is its familiarity, and that it mediates to you something from the past, and that on this concatenation of protoplasm, there is engraved libraries of tradition. And this concatenation of protoplasm is wearing out. And now I'm getting a message that gives me nachas only when I feel that what I am carrying, the burden of this knowledge, the imprint of this know-how, gets transferred. You understand? It really makes me happy to be here with you this evening and have a sense that with every aha that you make, you see the Zalman software work. Okay. And that makes it then possible for you that the next time when you are in a situation where you want to figure something out that has to do with this Jewish, spiritual, cosmic, you know, this tradition, this whole business, so you boot your Zalman, you know, and you start figuring out what you need to figure out. And there's a whole spreadsheet that comes out, and that's got 4 levels, 4 worlds. It has, you know, 4 levels of Torah. It has Yud Hey Vav Hey. It has breathing. It has the 10 Sefirot. You know what I'm saying? It's New Age Quabala, you know, and it's the kind of stuff that when you sort of put it together, you know, you see somehow you get a grid about the universe that makes it a little bit more freilich and lebendig, a little bit more doable, that looks like encouraging, okay? Now that's a very strong feeling that I have, this need to give this over. So as I catch myself in this, I begin to see that I'm just a riverbed through which this river flows. And it's wonderful that it doesn't get dammed up inside this individual, but that it can flow on, and that the hope is that it'll flow on from you further, and that we will be able to speak about the tradition continuing, okay? So you get to see tradition is a good thing, okay? If I look back to tradition, I see that it not only has a past, but it has a future also. And this is what we didn't learn in the yeshiva. In the yeshiva, we learned a lot about the past. Somehow the notion was everything came down at Sinai, and if you could clearly enough see what came down in the past, you got it all figured out. The trouble is that we can't drive with the rearview mirror. You know? Keep driving by what happened with the past. You can't deal with all the things that have changed in the present. So you also have to look to the future. So when you look to the future, the Hebrew language has some wonderful ways of going about it. For instance, when I say why, how did I say why in Hebrew? I heard lama and I heard madua. See, they're both true. If I want to know why did it happen in the past, I say madua. When I want to know to what end is it in the future, where will it lead me to, I say lama, okay? Most of our tradition has talked only about the madua and not enough about the lama. So I want to say this about the future. There is a tropism. If we only had to go by the past, the karma with which we come from the past would be overwhelming. But there something draws us. Something draws us. It's almost like the children draw the parents together in the first place. Those souls want to come down, so they draw parents together. Okay? A future wants to be born. It brings you here tonight. You know what I'm getting at? It's like, it's not so much our choice as it is like that plants have to grow toward the sun, and souls have to grow toward realization. And that is somewhere ahead of us. And what we now need to incorporate in our davening is to open the window to the future and not only to the past. Somewhere in the future are our realized beings as they do their final mikveh into God. You know what I'm saying? Somewhere in the future, all of us are finished, done with this, and we take back the plunge into God's infinity. And when we get to that place, there we know the answers. But time is not a line, and we can reach to that future. So how do we open a window to that future? We need a new siddur. And some of us are working on a new siddur. So, and I want to invite you to participate in any form in which you see. But it shouldn't just come from sitting down at the typewriter. You know how the rabbis used to do it before writing an invocation? Want to hold this for me for a moment? It would go something like this. Heavenly Father. You know? So then he would recite that invocation instead of davening it first and then writing it down. So the siddur that we need to work on is one that has gotten davened first and written later, and then davened again to see whether the way in which we reconstitute that original experience could really be reconstituted with the means that we put into the siddur. Okay? Okay, so this has to be an empirical siddur. A siddur is a prayer book, and it's like if someone, if he were to say, I have a feeling inside of me, and I want to be able to do something with that feeling. I don't know where to put it, you know. If I want to do it goyish, I get on my knees, you know, and I know a couple of things to do, but I don't know how to do it Jewish, okay? So then you open a book. The book has Hebrew on one side, has English on the other side, and sometimes when you're even trying to do it with the English and you say, I really want to do it, I really want to do it, sometimes the words get in the way. Sometimes the imagery gets in the way. The notions that had to do with the feudal business, you know, how do you get your feudal liege and lord to be nice to you? You grovel in the dust. You say, I'm a nothing, I'm such a nothing, I'm such a nothing, and you're the something, you're the great something, the wonderful something. Doesn't it fit for such a something like you to do a favor for a nothing like me? Okay? That was very much the language in which our prayer book was couched. And it worked for a long time. And it works for some people even now. And it works for those people who are in transactional analysis terms, in the child place dealing with parent. But those of us who are saying, I need my God in the adult place, you know, we don't have a resource. So that's a siddur. The siddur of the future will have a resource like that. One of the teachings we have from Luria is that there are interfaces between the infinite and the finite, and these are called partsufim, the faces of God. And how, now that we are operating in transformation, not in translation, which means conscious and deliberate, being aware of what we are doing, not merely acting in it, that it's up to us to design the face and faces of God for the next paradigm. It doesn't have to be king. It doesn't have to be father. It doesn't have to be mother. It shouldn't be noun. It should be more verb. It must be an inging God. Must be dynamic. You study Maimonides and all the others, and they want to make God so static that God doesn't move for eons and eons and is always the same. And that's not how we experience God. Okay? So then we have to create forms in which we can love that God and serve that God. So, laat maar zien wie me halt in der Welt. One of the things that we have to do is create ways in which we can daven together in twos and in threes. In our tradition, there was a no man's land between a single person davening and 10. You know, it's like it kept on to be 1 and 2 is also 2 ones and remains 9 ones, and at 10 you jump the digital jump, you know, over to minyan. Okay? But there is also some stuff happening when we are working in twos and in threes. Okay? How do 2 people daven together? How do 3 people daven together? And when we learn that, we learn a lot of things about partnering, about togethering. Can you imagine you sit and face your partner, and it's a person you love, and if you do your spiritual stuff, you haven't got time to hang out with your valued other, and if you hang out with the valued other, you may not have your spiritual time. But can you imagine if you could learn how to do it in twosies and in threesies, okay? So that something happens between solo and minyan, and that's a wonderful thing. It is perfect. You are loved. All is clear, and I am holy. It is in the hay of God's name. You in the vav. All is in the upper hay, and I in the yud. Holy. Okay. This group is 1, and this group is 2, okay? Okay. This is 3, and this is 4. Okay? 1. It is perfect. It is perfect. It is perfect. It is perfect. You are loved. All is clear, and I'm holy. Yud hey vav hey, aleph dalet nun yud, aleph hey yud hey, aleph hey vav hey. It is perfect. You are love, mama, mom, na 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 na. Sim shalom, tova uvracha, chayim chen v'chesed v'rachamim alev v'yino. Most of the time when you talk to the good people who are dealing with wonderful things like the Course on Miracles and positive thinking, and I'm not putting them down, hear me clearly, I'm not putting them down, but you hardly ever hear anything about the shadow side. What you get to hear is that if you do it you think right, if you think clear, if you do it good, all will be good. And it's not true accounting. It is not true accounting. Every technology, for all the help that we get from it, has a shadow cost. It would be very good if people are making a budget for a new highway to say, and this highway, besides costing so and so much on maintenance, will cost every year so and so many lives. Do you hear what I'm saying? In our cost accounting of shuttles, we expect always to get only light and no shadow. Everything that we are about to do calls for risks. Remember, you want to do it without risks, you're going to go back to the past, but you can't go back to the past because it's going to kick you into the future again. So you haven't got a choice, you have to move into the future. Moving into the future is a risky business, okay? So you have to talk about the costs. There is a hidden cost, for instance, of enlightenment. All the nice and wonderful teachers of enlightenment don't want to talk about the statistics of the people who are never in mental institutions with fabulous and super holy and insightful mental breakdowns. Gods and messiahs and Christs and what have you. People who have touched a great life wire, you know, and somehow the insulation went and they couldn't contain it. Okay? Kundalini is wonderful, but there are some casualties. You hear what I'm getting at? I don't want to say that we blithely are going to move into the future, and if you just will take Zalman software, you know, everything is going to go good because New Age Judaism is the answer for all what ails us, you know? We don't know yet what we're doing. We don't know how to hedge our risks. Okay. That's a hard one. That's the wonderful invitation that the more traditional forms of the past give us. Do it like it's written in the code of Jewish law. For years I lived with the Shulchan Aruch as the great, wonderful spiritual direction book, because it said, if you do this in this order, if you cut your fingernails in the right order, God will be pleased with you. I tell you, there is it's a wonderful moral holiday that you get. You know, it makes you feel good. I've done it right. The obligations are finite, okay? Everything that has happened since, you know, to me, and it starts out with existentialism. It says that you can't make your moral life as something that's finite. You're committed to a course of action, and there are risks and there are shadow things, and they have to be taken into consideration. I wish that people with religious visions and religious dreams become aware of the shadow. I wish for Khomeini and for others of the same attitude toward God and His law to be able to encounter the shadow cost and have to deal with it. It was easy to call the shadow devil and to say it was excommunicate from God's kingdom. When you have to integrate the shadow, it's different. Sometimes you have a group, a wonderful group, and you're doing it really well, but there's only this one nudnik. You know, if you could get rid of that one nudnik, then everything would be good in the group. And you get rid of the nudnik, and Next week another nudnik. Because it is in the nature of the aggregate, you see. We are trying to create a new aggregate, and we have to understand in the cost accounting what to do with the shadow. Mother Earth is not dead, as the 19th century wanted to show us in geology, but is alive, and she's conscious, and she's communicating with us all the time. And the likelihood is that I wouldn't have a thought in my mind if Mother Earth didn't support it. So my thinking and your listening is the doing of Mother Earth. A way in which we talked about it at one time was Shechina, the divine presence. The divine presence has a dark side. It was when some of us got to be so afraid of the dark side that we sought to find via the means of law at our command to exorcise the Shechina, and God became for us only the masculine polarity. One of the healing things that has to happen now, very clearly, is that we begin to deal with shadow costs organically. See, I didn't call it evil, I call it shadow. It is as integral to the process as is light. Can't have one without the other. Sometimes we do an exercise which I call the zikr of opposites. We begin to chant, and yes and no and up and down and me and you, and we do it in twos. And after a while in the chant we get to tune in with each other, so that pretty soon the partners keep saying more and more the same words. And after a while we move the chant and it becomes by itself, and yes, and no, and me, and you. And the conjunctive element starts coming out. Do you know what I'm saying? We have up to now had the yeses and the no, the eithers or the ors. And now we have to have the both in order to make that transformation work. I think I'm going to invite the questions and answers first. If you promise me that before you go, we're going to do one more turn in spreading blessing and inviting Shechina to take some Shechina energy home with us, okay? All right. Who would like to say? Please.
Is it possible...
All right.
Like Donahue, is it possible to use humor to integrate and handle the dark side?
It's impossible not to use humor. Okay? It works, you know, can you imagine the jokes? There were even jokes in concentration camp, you know? There were even jokes there. Because without that, it's terrible. Now, my sense is that we have made a long face in religion. We've sort of gotten a very tight-ass behavior that doesn't allow us to laugh. Listen, I once went to a congregation, it was funny, in Long Island. Okay? So I got to that congregation in Long Island, and you know, you start talking to folks, so you warm them up a little bit, you want to tell a joke, you want to see, are they alive, are they dead, you know, will they laugh, will they give you some energy back? And I start telling a few jokes, and I don't see, I'm not getting anything back. And I see all the people are looking at the rabbi who sits next to me there with a long, dour face. So I turned to the rabbi and I said, may I have your permission for all the good people here to laugh? And he said, yes. And then they laughed. Okay, another one. Make it a good one like this one, please.
Do you feel some type of unanimity when you stand up and you say a traditional prayer in the Hebrew, especially on a holiday when you know all over the world people are saying exactly the same words, like magnetic alignment almost all over the world. I personally would hate to see a siddur or any kind of prayer book in which that element was gone.
See, this is how they got us hooked on the notion that form, you heard the statement, the notion that form equals content, okay? In a sense, I hear an anxiety on your part. If we will change the form, will it still be Rosh Hashanah? Will it still be Unesana Toikif, you know, with all the feeling? Will it still be Kol Nidru with all the feeling that we have if the form will change? And the answer that comes to me is, if it doesn't generate the same thing, it doesn't do it. It isn't it. This is one of the challenges of creating the new siddur, not to break step with that harmony that comes every yontif, while at the same time making accessible on the level of meaning and feeling and connection. My sense is that all the holy days, if we check them out, we will find there is a coincidence of holy days, and the pretext that we give come from our tradition. But the times and the seasons of the year create holy days. That's what I feel. So we have, the wave is not only a Jewish wave that runs through the Yontif, it's also a general wave. Do you understand? I do have a feeling that we need to share more of the sacred technology with each other, because we're all doing it about the same time, the same season in the year. Shasa nisim lavotenu bayamim hahem bazman hazeh. It was then, it is now. It's coming back in those cycles. I would like to see Jews showing Christians how to make a Christmas Seder. Christmas has gotten so empty for Christians that if we could show them what we do with a Seder, you know, and how the intergenerational thing can go on, that we would be doing a toiva, we would be sharing some of our stuff. Conversely, take a look of how much we have absorbed of Christmas into Hanukkah already. You know, we don't make a big fuss about it, but with the presents every night, you know, with the whole geschäft, and you see the whole business. I said we don't have adversaries, we only have partners in the world, okay? The more you get to see that, then you see that mankind, humankind, is doing this thing of celebrating at the right time. That's why morning and evening times, the dawn and dusk times, are universal prayer times. It's not only for human beings. That's when the birds and the dogs and the donkeys and all, you know, all the other beings join into this thing. So do you see, seeing it larger, then you get to see that nothing is taken away.
You have such a beautiful Jewish background that you take for granted. That's what I'm really saying. You can write this Hebrew, you can read this Hebrew. I wonder if you can put yourself at the point of ignorance of what I'm seeing, that we're going downhill toward ignorance, and all that you take for granted in your own background is going to be lost.
Okay? I don't know that anything gets lost. It gets recycled, right? And I really, that's the anxiety. Can you imagine how much anxiety I feel? My Zayde was a Lamden, a Chassidische Yid through and through. Papa was already a shtickle, a secularized chassid, you know? Ask a Lubavitcher, do they count me as a chassid? They won't. And there is a way in which you could say, oh, the whole thing is slipping. It ain't what it used to be. I have a friend who says, even nostalgia ain't what it used to be. Hey, Chevre, I'm getting tired. It's time for the blessing. Will you stand up, please? Take a partner. Listen, in San Francisco, you know it already. All the Sufis do it. Face each other and say, chord. May the blessings of God rest upon illuminate your heart, now and forever. One more switch and then another switch of partners. May the blessings of God rest upon you. May God's peace abide with you. May God's presence illuminate your heart, now and forevermore. And now we are broadcasting it into the world. May the blessings of God rest upon you. May God's peace abide with you. May God's presence illuminate your heart, now and forevermore. Thank you. Okay, a song. Okay. Oh Lord, I want to do for you. Lord, I want to feel for you. Lord, I want to know for you. Lord, I want to be for you. Lord, I want to do for you. Lord, I want to feel for you. Lord, I want to know for you. Lord, I want to be for you. You are action. You are feeling. You are knowledge. You are being. You are action. You are feeling. You are knowledge. You just are